Here's something that almost nobody tells you before menopause hits. The muscle you've spent your entire life building, your body starts dismantling it. Quietly, methodically, and faster than you'd ever expect. We're not talking about getting a little softer around the edges. We're talking about a measurable, clinically documented process where your body begins breaking down muscle tissue faster than it can rebuild it, and it starts years before your last period. In some women, it begins in their late 30s. This process has a name. It's called sarcopenia. And understanding it, really understanding it, is the difference between fighting your body for the rest of your life and actually working with it to get strong again. So here's what we're going to cover: what sarcopenia actually is and why it happens during and after menopause, how hormones are driving the whole thing, what the research says about reversing it, and exactly what you need to do differently than you did in your 20s and 30s to build muscle after the change. Let's get into it. The word sarcopenia comes from Greek. Sarx means flesh. Penia means poverty. So literally, poverty of flesh, loss of muscle. And for a long time, scientists treated it as just aging, an inevitable side effect of getting older, like gray hair or needing reading glasses. But that thinking has completely shifted. The research now is clear. Sarcopenia is not inevitable. It's a condition. And like most conditions, it has specific causes, specific risk factors, and specific interventions that actually work. So what's happening in the body? Muscle tissue is not static. It's in a constant state of turnover, being broken down and rebuilt. This process is called muscle protein synthesis on the building side and muscle protein breakdown on the other. In a healthy, hormonally robust body, those two processes are in relative balance. You exercise, you eat protein, your muscles repair and grow slightly stronger. That's the cycle you've probably lived in most of your adult life. But here's where menopause changes the equation. Estrogen, and this surprises a lot of people, is directly involved in regulating that balance. Estrogen receptors exist in muscle tissue. Estrogen helps shuttle amino acids into muscle cells. It reduces inflammation that would otherwise break muscle down. It even interacts with satellite cells, the stem cells your muscles use to repair themselves. When estrogen drops, all of that support disappears. The breakdown side of the equation starts winning. And the result is that women can lose anywhere from 3 to 8% of their muscle mass per decade after 40, and that rate accelerates in the years immediately surrounding menopause. 3 to 8% per decade sounds manageable until you do the math. That's potentially a quarter of your total muscle mass gone by the time you're in your 60s. And muscle isn't just about how you look in the mirror. Muscle is metabolic tissue. It burns calories at rest. It stabilizes your joints. It regulates blood sugar. It keeps you upright and mobile and independent. Losing it has cascading consequences that most women are never warned about. Let's go deeper on the hormones, because this is where things get really interesting and where most mainstream fitness advice completely falls apart for women over 40. Estrogen is the one everyone talks about, but it's not working alone. You've also got progesterone dropping, which affects sleep quality, and poor sleep is one of the most underrated drivers of muscle loss. You've got cortisol, your stress hormone, which tends to become more dominant as estrogen declines. And cortisol is directly catabolic, meaning it breaks muscle down. You've got insulin sensitivity changing, which affects how efficiently your muscles use the carbohydrates you eat to fuel training and recovery. And then there's testosterone. Yes, women produce testosterone. Less than men, but it matters enormously, especially for muscle. Testosterone peaks in women in their 20s and declines steadily from there. By the time a woman is in full menopause, her testosterone levels can be half what they were at their peak. That loss is a significant driver of sarcopenia that almost never gets discussed in conversations about women's health. There's also IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is essentially growth hormone's active partner in the body. It's one of the main signals that tells your muscles to repair and grow after exercise. IGF-1 is stimulated partly by estrogen, so when estrogen drops, IGF-1 drops too. You exercise just as hard, but the anabolic signal, the grow and repair signal, is quieter than it used to be. What this means practically is that a woman in menopause is operating in a fundamentally different hormonal environment than she was 10 years ago. And if she's training and eating the same way she did 10 years ago and wondering why nothing is working, this is why. The inputs are the same, but the internal machinery has changed. Now here's where most conversations stop, with the problem. But the science doesn't stop there, because the research on reversing sarcopenia is genuinely exciting, and the strategies are specific enough that you can actually use them. The single most important thing the research tells us is this: muscle can be built at any age. That's not a motivational slogan. It's been demonstrated in controlled trials. Studies have shown meaningful muscle gain in women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s when the right stimulus is applied. The capacity for muscle protein synthesis never disappears. It just becomes less efficient, and that means the strategy has to change. Let's start with resistance training, because nothing else comes close in terms of evidence. Not cardio, not yoga, not Pilates, though those have their value for other reasons. When it comes to building and preserving muscle tissue after menopause, progressive resistance training is the intervention that the research consistently supports above everything else. Progressive is the key word. Your muscles need to be challenged beyond what they're currently used to in order to adapt and grow. This means adding weight, adding reps, or increasing difficulty over time. A body that's comfortable is a body that has no reason to change. Comfortable doesn't build muscle. Challenge does. What's particularly interesting is that postmenopausal women actually respond well to higher loads, meaning heavier weights with lower repetitions, perhaps even better than lighter, higher rep training. A 2019 study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research found that heavier resistance training produced greater gains in muscle thickness and functional strength in postmenopausal women compared to moderate loads. This runs counter to the conventional wisdom that older women should tone with light weights. Light weights maintain what you have at best. Heavy weights, safe, progressive, coached heavy weights are what actually rebuild. Frequency matters too. Training each muscle group at least twice a week appears to be the sweet spot based on current evidence. Once a week isn't enough stimulus. The muscle needs to be challenged repeatedly to send a strong enough signal for the body to prioritize rebuilding it. Now here's something the research has become very clear on in the last few years, and it directly counters advice that's been circulating in the fitness world for decades. You cannot out-train a protein deficit. Protein is the raw material muscle is made from. You can provide the training stimulus all day long, but if the amino acids aren't there to actually build the tissue, the adaptation won't happen. Think of it like trying to build a house with the blueprints but no lumber. The old recommended daily allowance for protein, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, was designed to prevent deficiency in a sedentary population. It was never designed to support muscle building in active, postmenopausal women. Most researchers working in this space now recommend somewhere between 1.6 and 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight for women who are actively training and trying to build muscle. For a 150-pound woman, that's roughly 109 to 150 grams of protein per day. Most women eating a normal diet are getting half that. And there's a specific amino acid that deserves mention here: leucine. Leucine is found in high concentrations in animal proteins, meat, eggs, dairy, and it's the primary trigger for muscle protein synthesis. It essentially flips the switch. Research suggests that each meal should contain somewhere around 2 to 3 grams of leucine to maximally stimulate muscle building. That's roughly equivalent to what you'd find in about 30 grams of protein from a quality source. This is why protein distribution across meals matters. Front-loading all your protein in one meal is not as effective as spreading it across 3 or 4 meals that each hit that leucine threshold. For women who are plant-based, this is still achievable, but it requires more intentional combining of protein sources, since most plant proteins are leucine-poor and incomplete. Soy is an exception. So are certain combinations of legumes and grains. One more thing on protein that often gets missed. Appetite tends to decrease after menopause, and the hormonal drive to eat enough just isn't as strong. This means many women are not only dealing with increased muscle protein breakdown, they're inadvertently underfueling the rebuilding process at the same time. That double disadvantage is why sarcopenia accelerates so rapidly for women who aren't paying attention to this. We've covered the science of why this happens and the two biggest levers, training and protein. But there are a few other pieces that are getting serious attention in the research right now, and leaving them out would be doing you a disservice. Sleep is where muscle actually gets built. During deep sleep, your body releases growth hormone, clears inflammatory byproducts, and does the repair work that training stimulated. Postmenopausal women are disproportionately affected by sleep disruption, night sweats, elevated cortisol, changes in sleep architecture. Poor sleep doesn't just leave you tired, it raises catabolic hormones, lowers anabolic ones, reduces insulin sensitivity, and directly impairs muscle protein synthesis. Protecting sleep is protecting muscle. Creatine monohydrate deserves special mention because it is one of the most well-researched supplements in all of sports science, and it's consistently under-discussed in women's health spaces. Creatine helps regenerate the energy currency your muscles use during high-intensity efforts, allowing you to do more work in training sessions. But more relevant to this conversation, recent research specifically in older women shows that creatine supplementation combined with resistance training produces greater gains in muscle mass and strength compared to resistance training alone. It also appears to have neuroprotective benefits and some evidence of supporting bone density. 3 to 5 grams per day. That's it. No loading phase necessary. Chronic inflammation is the third piece. Menopause is associated with increased baseline inflammation, driven by the loss of estrogen's anti-inflammatory effects. Chronic inflammation accelerates muscle breakdown and blunts the anabolic response to training. This is why lifestyle factors like managing stress, reducing ultra-processed foods, getting adequate omega-3 fatty acids, and staying active in general aren't just wellness advice. They're directly relevant to your ability to build and keep muscle. So let's bring this all together. Sarcopenia, the loss of muscle that accelerates through menopause, is not inevitable. It's driven by a predictable set of hormonal changes. Falling estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, IGF-1. Those changes make muscle harder to build and easier to lose, but the capacity to rebuild is never lost. The strategy to fight back is specific: progressive resistance training, prioritizing heavier loads, training each muscle group at least twice a week. Adequate protein, meaningfully more than you've probably been eating, distributed across meals with enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis at each one. Protecting sleep like the performance variable it actually is, considering creatine if you haven't already. And managing the low-grade inflammation that menopause tends to amplify. None of this is about trying to be 20 again. It's about building the strongest, most capable body available to you right now, because the research is clear that that body is still within reach. The women who understand this science and apply it are not just maintaining. They're genuinely getting stronger, and there's no reason you can't be one of them. If this kind of evidence-based approach to health after menopause is what you're looking for, Elevated Woman Lab is the place to be. We go deep on the science so you can make decisions that actually make sense for the body you're living in right now. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because we're just getting started.